officially good morning. Welcome to Yoga Pilates Fusion. We're going to start laying down. You can start with a blanket if you like, or you can start without. You just lie down on your back. So I like the blanket. I'm going with that. Now I'm going to probably do straight legs, but I'll show you a couple different options. You probably could make up some of your own as well. So I think maybe we started this way on Monday with a little butterfly shape. You could also leave your feet resting on the floor. I'm going to extend my legs out so it's a little closer to a fish pose, although in my case fairly mild version of a fish pose. If your blanket is a little more robust or fluffier, it might be much more like a fish pose. All right, so as long as you don't feel like your low back is in any kind of danger, you can settle your arms as you like. Now, for me, to target the deeper shoulder stabilizer, the one that kind of pulls my shoulder blade a little forward, keeping my arm kind of in the neutral position is the best for that. And if I want to target the bigger chest muscle, then I might take my arms out like kind of like a wing, closer to the height of my shoulder. So the deeper shoulder stabilizers, there's not as much of a feeling of stretch, but there is a sort of release around the edges of this blanket that I like. And then once you settle in, we're just going to pause for a few moments. This gives us a position within which to notice the breath. Of course, actively trying to move the muscles between my ribs. So I'm trying to get my ribs to move with the breath, expand and release, which is their job. That's part of what they do. I'm just emphasizing that a bit. I've got my spine positioned on this blanket so I can really feel how the rib cage is moving. I'm going to do 2 more breaths. Now, I'm going to bring my feet to the ground so I can just sort of push myself over and slide the blanket out. And then coming back, I get to have all of that sort of experience of the muscle, the skin, all the tissue in my upper back, kind of changing places back to where it came from. There's a little impression left behind by the blanket, it slowly fades. So you can do any movement that you like while that's happening. And then we're gonna do a little release for the hip flexors. So we're starting set in this constructive rest position. So the feet are on the floor. And then we're gonna add some abdominal work to it as well. But so you can bring your hands behind your head, and we'll use the hands as an opportunity to kind of press the head back in, so that when we're curling up, to flex the spine, we're just curling using the abdominal muscles and not pulling on the neck. So keep the head and neck kind of secured. So we're going to take the toes on one leg. I'm going to start with my right foot and lift those toes up. And then as best you can, you're going to glide your leg out nice and smooth. If for whatever reason your mat's a little sticky, you have to do a little bit of a lift of your leg to get there. Once you get all the way straight, let your leg rest on the floor and really stretch through it. We're going to start with the toes pointing straight up. Just try to feel that stretch all the way up to the bottom of the rib cage as best we can, or at least the lower back. And then gliding the leg back in, we're going to pick the knee up, bring it towards the forehead, flex the spine, and then bring it down and let that leg rest. Okay, so that's just a brief moment, but we want all the muscle to soften. All right, so we stretch it out, allow the leg to rest and stretch at the same time so it's heavy on the floor. We're not hoisting it up. And then we're going to glide in, bring the knee in, flex straight down the center. Rest the leg. Glide it out, stretch, let the leg rest on the floor, and then we're going to glide it back, curl in, and let the leg rest a moment. Okay, so now we're going to add an external rotation. So we'll glide out. When you get all the way out, rotate the leg outward so the toes, everything point to the right, in this case, right leg. Stretch through the leg, and then we're going to bring that knee towards my right elbow instead. So I'm going to let the leg rest heavy, glide it out, rotate and stretch through it, and then glide it back, bringing the knee in and flexing the spine. All right, so we'll take that one more time, gliding out through the external rotation. Stretch out through the leg, glide it back in, curl, and rest. So now we'll do an internal rotation and try to bring the knee towards the left elbow when we curl in. Be a little bit of a twist. So we're going to stretch the leg out, rotate inwardly as much as it'll let you. Feel the muscles that are responsible for that internal rotation if you can, as you're stretching everything else. And then we're going to glide in and add that little bit of a twist. Rest the leg, stretch it out, turn, and then we're going to glide it in, rest the leg. Let's do that one more time. Stretch it out, rotate it inward, and then glide in for your twist, and then release. Now I'm going to let my head relax, but stretch the leg all the way out one more time, and just sort of pivot through that internal to external rotation, and stretch out through the leg. Just pivoting in each kind of one of those points, trying to stretch. And then I'm going to give it a little more of a loose pivot. See if I can release any tension from the joint, and then glide that back in and rest for a moment. And just compare the two. There may not be a lot of sensation differences, but you might be able to perceive the external hip rotators, the internal hip rotator on the front side, and even potentially a little bit of a difference in the way your low back sort of hangs out along with the pelvis. All right, we'll do the other side. So we're going to take that left leg, pick the toes up, we're going straight out, stretch down the center. Again, I'm trying to let the legs stay heavy on the ground while I'm stretching, and then curling in. Rest the legs so the weight is released onto the floor, and then stretch it out. And bring it in. Rest the leg on the floor, and then stretch it out. Got some external rotation to do, stretching it out. So this one's going to come toward my left elbow as I curl in. Leg rest. I mostly just want to feel all the muscles there in my hip let go before I start the next round. And then bring that in. And one more with the external rotation. If you have tight hip flexors, this feels really subtle. But, oh gosh, it's pretty powerful. For all of its subtlety, it's pretty great. All right, we're gonna rotate inward and stretch. It's not an easy muscle to target, really. All right, this one's coming towards my right elbow with a little bit of a twist. And resting and gliding out and rotating internally. And then coming across. And one more of those. Glide out. Come across. All right, so then I'm gonna glide that leg out, and as I'm stretching through it, I'm rotating through those three different positions: the external rotation, center, and internal rotation. And I have a difference in my two hips. One internally rotates a little bit more than the other. One that mostly feel even on the external rotation, but it's probably slightly off. You might notice a big difference just in the way it feels for the leg to be in neutral. Sometimes we're asymmetrical. All right, so now I'm going to give that more of a kind of jiggle, a little bit of a release in that hip socket. Glide that leg back in as best I can, rest both legs, and then just check in, see if there's a difference in the way the hip kind of falls here, low back. The hip flexor muscles, at least one of them, kind of starts way up. It's behind the belly button. It comes down, meets this big muscle inside the pelvis. That's what we're trying to release. Maybe a little bit of the attachment points that go right over the top of the hip. Okay, so we're going to take right knee and bring it in. So we're coming back to that position. This time we're going to extend the left leg and stretch it out. So I've got a single straight leg stretch. I'm going to curl myself in. And then, so I've got a flexed spine to start with. I'm just going to add on to that by curling up a little more. You can reach down towards your ankle with your arms if you like, and reach for that heel. Try to do the extra curl in from the abs and not from your neck. And we're stretching through that leg. Two more. Now you can bring both knees in and hold yourself in this flexed position with your hands behind your head, or you can put your head back down and bring your hands down closer to your hips. We're going to extend the legs and glue them together as best you can. Spread out your toes. We're lowering the legs down for 4, 3, 2, 1, holding 4, 3, 2, 1, and coming back. Lowering 4, 3, 2, 1, holding 4, 3, 2, 1, return. Lower 4, 3, 2, 1, hold 4, 3, 2, 1, return. Lower 4, 3, 2, 1, hold 4, 3, 2, 1, return. Lower 4, 3, 2, 1, hold 4, 3, 2, 1, return. Last one, 4, 3, 2, 1, hold 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, return. And we're going to release the legs. Ooh. Give everything a little movement as you like. We're gonna stretch out into a nice long shape and then curve ourselves into a little banana. You could cross your long leg side over the curled in leg side if you like, so that the side of your waist that you're stretching is that side that goes over the top. You can also leave the legs loose. You can loosen up the arms if you like, or leave them extended. Let the body rest as best you can on both shoulder blades and both hips evenly. We'll do about 3 more breaths. And then we're going to come back to the center. Unleashing that right side. We're going to take the knees and bring them in. All right, bring your arms out. We're going to take the legs over to the right side and maybe curl the knees in, maybe straighten out a leg or two. Come to the center, lift, over to the left side. Come to the center, lift, to the right, and lift, left, and then lift. Right side, center, left side, center. One more, right side, center, left side, center. And then we're going to stretch ourselves back out. And we'll take that banana shape, go in the opposite direction. So I'm now curving towards my right. I'm going to cross my left ankle over the top. And again, with both shoulder blades and both hips resting on the floor, I'm going to let myself settle in as I kind of gently stretch into the shape. One more breath. And then we'll come back to the center. Now, we're going to roll like a ball. So we're going to bring the knees in, bring ourselves up so that we have kind of a little boat pose, and then rock back and up and a little boat pose. We're trying to get a nice, smoothly rounded flex spine as best we can. 2 more. And last one. And we'll come to a seated position. All right, so the legs are going to be extended out and slightly wide, which for some of us means the pelvis kind of wants to lean backwards. So if that's the case for you, then what you can do is put either a blanket underneath your knees or a pillow under each knee so there's a bent knee position, or you can try elevating the whole thing and sitting up on the edge of a blanket or on a pillow so that your hips are a little higher in relationship to your knees, and that might be the best answer. We're going to try to keep the toes pointing straight up and kind of extend the feet out. And we're going to do this first round a little slow so that we can sort of give our hamstrings a moment to stretch. Now, I find if I put a block next to each of my feet, and I haven't decided whether I like it inner or outer better yet, but I'm gonna go inward. It gives me a little feedback for keeping my toes straight, because often when I do the saw, my legs want to kind of splay out. I'm trying to keep this part as steady as I can. So the block just gives me a little bit of feedback, and it's something to reach for rather than my toe. Don't have to worry about that. Okay, so we're gonna take ourselves, rotate one direction, I'm just turn to left, and then we're gonna stretch in towards that leg and just pause for a moment instead of doing the pulse. And just notice if there's any muscle like inner thigh, hamstring that might be resistant to this notion today. And you can take care of that. We're going to come back, rotate the other way and fold. And again, I'm trying to, as best I can, keep my toes pointing up rather than let them kind of splay out. So I've got my quads active, my inner thighs are a little active. Trying to hold steady on that internal rotation, just enough to keep my legs as stable as possible. All right, so now if you've gotten some feedback from your hamstrings, please take care of yourself. Otherwise, we're gonna do this in that kind of flowing style that is the saw. So turning and sawing in, 1, 2, 3, returning to the center, turning, sawing in, 1, 2, 3. Good, nice and tall. 1, 2, 3. Again, I'm trying to keep my legs as best I can, nice and steady. 3, and in between each round, get a little taller. 1, 2, 3. Return. 1, 2, 3. Return. One more. 1, 2, 3. Return. 1, 2, 3. Return. Now, we're going to bring both feet together. And you can bring your heels in as tight as you like. I generally keep a little distance so that I can bring my knees closer to the ground. If I bring my feet in closer, it brings my knees up. So there's, all of us have bone structure that's a little different. I'm going to get my sit bones out just a little bit behind me. And then tilting just the same amount that the pelvis will tilt. So I'm going to try to keep my spine oriented toward my pelvis. If my pelvis will tilt far enough forward that my spine extends out really close to my feet, fine. Mine doesn't. That's about as far as it goes. Now, if I can bring my head closer to my heels, but that involves flexing my spine. So I'm going to try to keep my spine more neutral and access kind of this almost a sense that I'm wrapping the inner thigh around towards the outside. As I bring my knees towards the ground, keeping my breastbone lifted. And just notice where the tug points are. Now we'll return to these notions when we're done doing our standing poses. We're going to take one more breath. Good, we'll come on back. Release the legs. Now, I'm going to come up to all fours and do some little cat shapes. You can do that for as long as you like. And then we'll go to downward dog and give ourselves a little bit of time there. Eventually, we're going to wind up standing on our own 2 feet. And a mountain pose. So, I'll join you there. Now, I'm going to find myself in a mountain pose. If it's not quite time for you yet, just take your time, get there. Maybe you need a little more time with downward dog this morning, or some other version of it. All right, so whatever end you choose to stand on, that's always going to be the front or the top of your mat. And the other end directly behind you is going to be the back or the bottom. And if I say turn, we're going to turn our toes towards the back of the mat, that means we're going in that direction. And or whatever yours is. And then if I say towards the front, we're going in this direction, the way we're facing. So that those landmarks are going to remain the same no matter what else happens. So starting with your mountain pose, when you get there, find a moment and kind of try to get your feet as even as you can so that the weight is distributed between your heels and your toes, the inside arch and the outside arch of your foot, and then left to right as evenly as possible. And see what that does, like what muscles fire up. Because it's possible we have some postural imbalances, and this will show up here. We'll become aware that maybe one hip is working a little harder than the other, or body wants to kind of push us onto our toes or onto our heels instead of being in the center. Just notice. We'll see if those things change. All right, so taking a big breath, we're going to reach the arms overhead. Again, if you need a few more moments, just get here when you get here. We're going to side bend over here to the left. Coming back into that territory. Coming back to center. Take a balancing pose. I'm going to take a tree. You can do any pose you like. I'm going to take a big breath, pick up my left leg and step back into a warrior one shape. So I can turn my ribs forward or line them up with my hips, but it doesn't take me all the way around to the side. Still sort of oriented towards the front of the mat. I want my heel on the ground on the back leg, and then I'm going to stretch between those 2 points. So you can decide how much rotation your ribs have. I'm going to take a nice long stretch out into a spine stretch. And then we're going to roll ourselves up. If it feels like you're on a really crazy tightrope, wiggle your right foot a little to the right. Give yourself a wider base. All right, so spine stretching forward. Trying to make the spine as long as possible, and then we're going to roll it up, pelvis first, and then as best you can, stack each vertebrae all the way up to the top of the stack. Nice big long stretch. The spine stretch is usually done seated, so we're adding this balance challenge to it in the warrior one. We're going to straighten out the front leg and fold toward it. Now, you may not make it all the way to the ground, either with your hands or your torso may not make it all the way to your shin. Just find the point where you feel a stretch. Now, I've rotated my foot around just a little bit so that I'm feeling a stretch through my calf muscles on my back leg. I'm pressing my big toe, my pinky toe into the ground, and kind of spreading the other ones out. So there's some activity in my arches, my feet. And I'm lifting my kneecap on this front leg so my quads are active. And 2 more breaths here. Now I'm going to bend my knee and step back into down dog. You can hold down dog or add a full, or the rest of anyway, the sun salutation. We'll take the right leg up. We're going to bring that knee in, curl up around it. Stretch it back. Bring it in, curl up. Stretch it back, sink into the left heel. And then bring it in, step it forward. Now we're going to put all the weight on that right leg. See if we can pick the left one up. Do a little baby standing splits. And then bring that knee in, foot down, come up halfway, fold, and then all the way to standing. Oh. Give yourself a nice big breath. And find your mountain pose again and see if there's any difference between the two sides. Ooh. Nice big breath, arms go up. Grabbing the left wrist, we'll stretch over to the right. Nice big breath there. Ooh. Coming back to the center, weight on the left leg, right leg lifts. Tree pose for me. One more breath. And then we're going to lift that leg and step ourselves into warrior one. Find the nice steady balance. Decide how you're turning your ribs. It might be more or less depending on your anatomy. And then stretch yourself out. And roll yourself up. I always start with the pelvis. And try to feel each of the other vertebrae slide into place. It's really nice. Stretch out. Roll it in. And up. Okay, one more like that. Stretch out. And roll up. When we get to the top, we're going to straighten out the front leg and fold into it. So I got active quads, I've got active arches in my feet. Well, active feet anyway. And I'm honoring whatever relationship my hamstrings are willing to give me in this moment. Whatever that might be right now. If they're a little tight, I'll be a little more accommodating. Take a breath. And then again, I'm stepping back to down dog. And again, you can add the sun salutation if you like, or just hold your dog. And while you're holding, you can add a little movement to it. Now, eventually, our friends are going to join us in down dog. We're going to take the left leg up, bring the knee in, curl up around it. Stretch it out, bring it in, curl up around it, stretch it out, and then step it forward. Bring ourselves to a little baby standing splits. It doesn't have to be too crazy. I've got my fingertips on the ground. And then bring that right knee in, put the foot down, come up halfway and fold. And then we'll come to standing. Find our mountain pose and see if anything changed. So last time one side felt longer, a little bit taller, and now both sides are even. All right. Taking a big breath, reaching up, grabbing that right wrist, a little stretch over to the left. Coming back, we're gonna center the weight. Pick up our left leg. Now you could leave your arms overhead as we sort of lean toward a warrior three, or if you want, you can bring the arms into a different position. If it starts to fall apart, catch. Hold and steady, or as best you can. One more breath. And then we're going to step back, but turn this into a warrior two. So it might take a little adjusting in the hip. So now the hips and the ribs stay together, right? It's one of the main differences between warrior one and warrior two. Hips and ribs are going to stay together. And they're a little more rotated towards the outside because we've opened ourselves up a little bit. But we're not trying to drag this front leg around. So make sure your hip joints are cool with the direction, and then this matches. We'll come back to reverse. and over for a side angle. So we've got that mermaid. And we're working from the obliques on the sides of the waist. Stretching out. And it's like you're trying to stretch from your whole side, not from your arm. The arm's kind of along for the ride. One more of those. Maybe. We're gonna come back to warrior two and then swing everything around. We're heading halfway to the back. So my toes are parallel. If that feels crummy in my knees, I can turn my toes out a little bit. And then we're gonna fold forward into a wide angle forward bend. You can adjust the legs closer together, wider apart. You can decide that you're gonna add some little layers. So I'm pressing my elbows into a block and essentially extending my spine like I did in that little butterfly forward bend that we did after the saws. So I'm just coming home to that sensation. I'm gonna go a little closer in and try that again. Notice if it's different for you to have your legs wide folding forward while you're standing versus sitting down. It might be exactly the same in terms of the arrangement your hip will make with your femur bone. All right, so we're gonna come in with the heels, and it might need to be more than one time, and then we'll come into a wide squat. So I'm keeping my hips no lower really than my knees. I can be higher though. So the inner thigh is kind of wrapping back. All right, so I'm gonna come around, turning back toward the front of the mat. I'm gonna launch myself into a downward dog eventually, but I'm putting a block here for the end, which is gonna be a half moon balance. I'm just prepping myself for that. Maybe. Mat is sticky enough to not allow for downward dog, but not sticky enough for anything else. So we're going through a sun salutation or holding down dog, your choice. Now, that right leg is gonna come up and over, kind of like a little scorpion tail. And then I'm gonna step that foot forward, and this is gonna become my half moon balance. So you don't have to use a block. Hold on, I gotta move a little bit away from the plant. Okay. You don't need a block. You can use the floor or furniture. But now that I'm here, I'm gonna see if I can bring my top leg up and then circle it for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold and steady, going the other way. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, lifting up, and then I'm going to bring that leg in, come up halfway, fold in, come all the way to standing. Oh, nice big stretch. Notice mountain pose, see if it's now, once again, a little asymmetrical. Oh. All right, let's do it. Big breath. Grabbing the left wrist, little stretch to the left. Coming back to the middle, weights in the left leg. And then we're gonna take that version of warrior 3. That works for you. One more breath. Ooh, and then we're gonna step back and turn that into warrior 2. Once you got like where your hips are positioned, add in your mermaids. All right, one more of those. And then I'm coming back to warrior 2, swinging everything around toward the back about halfway, And then folding into a wide angle forward bend. Oh. Alrighty. So you can do any version you like. For this one, I'm just ragdolling over. So last time I kept my spine a little more kind of extended right away from my pelvis. And this time I'm just letting it hang out. Still strong in my legs, kind of pressing my feet out to the sides. All right, so I'm gonna bring the heels in, come back to the wide squat. Taking one more breath here. All right, so coming around to the front. Again, I'm just gonna make sure I've got something within easy reach. And then I'm gonna try to step back into down dog. Now we're gonna come all the way onto the belly. So whether you do that with a plank or some extra push-ups, well, that's up to you. And then we're gonna turn the head to one side. Now you can lace your arms behind you or just let them rest. We're gonna bring the heels in and kick them in. 1, 2, 3. Lift into a locust, bringing your head to the center. And then release on the other side, on the other cheek. 1, 2, 3. Lift and down. Okay, carry on. That's what we're gonna do. 3 more on each side. Okay, one more on this side. Oh, and one more on this side. Oh. And then I'm coming back to downward dog. Oh. Apparently with a lot of groaning. Hooking my left leg over like a little scorpion tail. Oh, and then stepping that guy forward and coming into half moon balance. Oh. If I feel fairly sturdy, I'm going to take that top leg and circle it for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Go in the other direction. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Nice lift. Bring it to the ground. Coming up halfway. And fold. And then all the way to standing. All right, we're gonna come to mountain pose one more time, just so we have one more opportunity to notice the change. All right, yogis. So we're gonna lift up, exhale, fold. Inhale, come up halfway. Exhale, fold. We're gonna either squat down just as you are, or maybe widen your feet out, but the hips are gonna go lower than the knees if it's possible. Could be a chair pose, hard to say. Oh. Now the theory is that we're just gonna sit down and come right into a boat pose. But that may not work out. So you can get down and into a boat pose in whatever way works for you. Now, I'm gonna grab hold of my big toes and take this kind of big toe wide angle. But you don't have to do that version. You can do a straight boat or even some teasers if you want to do some teasers. Oh. One more breath. Bringing that back together. And then then coming down. So I'm gonna swing myself around so I can lay on my right side. Oh. Now, my preference is to have the neck neutral, and some people like to prop themselves up. And the issue here is just simply wrist neck. Like there's a kind of tendency to collapse. So as long as you can keep yourself lifted, you might even do it like that. That's fine. Oh. Do what's right for you. This kind of just takes the neck out of the equation for me and lets me really focus just on my core. So line your legs up so you get an appropriate challenge for you, and then bring the feet in. So if I have a little more of a bend at my hip here, it's going to keep me more stable. If I try to keep that space right there really open, it's going to be a little bigger challenge to hold myself stable, okay? So the feet are up, knees are together. We've got a little internal rotation here on this top leg. We're going to open that up, externally rotate it, and maybe extend the leg and come back. All right, so keep your torso stable by hugging in your abdominal muscles, and see how this goes. Your arm can be up front for more stability, or on your hip, or in the air to make it a little more challenging to hold steady. All right, trying to move as smooth as I can and keep my abdominals nice and steady. We got 3 more to go. I'm going to bring my legs back down, take this leg around the top. So I'm going to put my foot on the ground, but you could also extend your leg out straight, and then keep lengthening out through my right leg and lifting it. I'm going to pulse it up, and I'm trying to pulse it from the muscles that live deep in my hip, those hip flexors, and everything else that will help. But see if I can feel that muscle also helping me out. For 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then circle the leg. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, go the other way. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now, we're gonna roll into our back, and this, well, this is what I'm gonna do. This left leg is gonna stay over. I'm gonna do a little reclining pigeon. Now, if you wanna do a regular pigeon, instead of rolling onto your back, you could roll onto your belly and do it that way instead. So I've got my thigh and my shin, or my foot in my hand, and as I bring this leg across my body, I get a little more of that pigeon-y shape. Now I can leave my right leg in toward me, foot on the ground, or extend out through it. I'm gonna extend out. Just make sure the kneecap and the toes point in the same direction, so there's no twisting or torquing in your knee. Two more breaths. Now, if you're in a regular pigeon, you're going to wind up bringing your leg around. For this guy, I'm going to kind of throw my leg over the top and then bring myself up to a seated position and get my hips stable, and then twist in that direction. One more breath here. Oh, I'm going to come around, lay on my left side. I'm going to repeat that whole thing again. All right. Now, again, deciding how wide that hip joint should be. A little closed in is going to be more supported. This, when it's open, when I open it as wide as my hip flexors are willing to let me go, There's a tendency for my hip to want to dip forward, so that's how I'm controlling all of that with my abs and potentially using my arm for support there. So then we'll move through these little clamshell kicks. And again, choosing an appropriate, like maybe you don't extend your leg all the way, or maybe not at all. And trying to hold steady through your abdomen so the hips aren't moving and the shoulders aren't moving. So 4 more. Okay, last one here. And then I'm going to straighten out my legs and bring that top guy over. And lengthening out through the bottom. And again, I just want to keep the abdominals and my hips and shoulders aligned. And then I'm going to lift that left leg, try to feel that deep inner hip muscle, that deep positioning there. So that as I'm pulsing my leg in, sure, I'm doing that more with my inner thigh, but I want to feel that hip flexor helping me out. Or at the very least, noticing it. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then we're circling 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, switching directions, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Bringing that leg down. And again, I'm going to roll onto my back for my pigeon, but if you went onto the belly, you'll do it that way. Oh. Okay. I'm just holding it steady. So 2 more breaths. All right, so I'm gonna put that leg down. You might be swinging your leg around if you were doing the regular version of the pigeon, and then doing a little seated twist. One more breath. Now, this is normally where you head off to work. Namaste. And if this is the time where you can join me for Savasana, that's what we're doing next. So I'm going to put a pillow under my legs so that there's a lot of really nice comfy support for my low back. Before I get all the way there, I'm going to do a little of this kind of windshield wipery moves, shake out each leg as I straighten it out. Snuggle my shoulder blades in so they're in neutral. Essentially, I'm going after a mountain pose, but laying down. But all of those same kinds of alignments of the torso, the hips. Maybe the legs are a little wider here, the arms a little wider. But pretty close. And you can stretch out like a big starfish if you want to. And let your body relax. That's the main thing. So we want to unwind every muscle. So take a moment just to notice your breath. Take a breath so deep you can feel it all the way to your tiptoes. Let go with a big ah. And then wiggle fingers and toes at first. Wrist and ankles. And give yourself a big stretch. Maybe curl up in a little ball shape. Oh, give yourself a little hug and a back massage. And then when you're ready, a seated position. Let's take a big breath together. Namaste.